Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to UFC Roundup. I'm Paul Felder. He's Michael Chiesa. He's not frozen right now. I'm not frozen right now. I'm still in Las Vegas here at the Holiday Inn Express. Going to call the Contender Series tonight. 266 just happened this past weekend, and it was insanity. If you missed it, I'm sorry for you because it was one of the greatest events that I've ever been a part of. I can tell you that. Michael, main event, co-main event. Diaz makes his return. Merab Dvalishvili, the list goes on of just incredible performance and standout performances this past weekend. What did you think?
UFC 266 was full of a lot of different narratives. We saw rivalries being settled. We saw great champions establish their dominance in their respected weight classes. We saw guys, win fights that create some big movement in their respected weight classes. And we saw the return of the great Nick Diaz. So there was a lot of good narratives with this event. And I mean, the fights delivered from the opening prelim into that main event. There was a lot of exciting fights, a lot of stuff to unpack, and I'm sure it was great to be Octagon side for that event.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. And that main event, we got to start there. Ortega, Volkanovski, these guys went after it. Volk looked unbelievable. His movement, we knew it was going to be a big part of winning that fight for him to go out there and secure that victory, because he can't be lazy and sloppy around Ortega. He'll snatch your neck up, which he even had his opportunities. That's what was so great about this fight. The guys went back and forth on the feet. Both looked good. Both had their moments. But obviously, Volkanovski was in control, landing more volume. But then anytime you let Ortega knock you down or get on top of you, he snatched that neck up. And we saw Volkanovski fight out of one of the tightest mounted guillotines that I've seen somebody able to actually get out, because there's not much you can do there other than hold your breath, push on those hips, try to get free. But he did just enough to wiggle out. Michael, when you were watching that, you had to have thought, just like me, DC, and Anik thought, we were saying this is over. He's either going to tap out to this or he's going to go to sleep. And man, the toughness that the Aussie showed is incredible.
Oh, dude, 100%. I mean, in for the people that are watching this right now, when you are stuck in that mounted guillotine, not only is Ortega on top of Volk with his neck, but he's got his arm trapped with his legs too. And that eliminates the ability to hand fight the choking arm, really takes away the options you have in terms of defense. And Volk really just kind of had to bite down on his mouthpiece, tuck his chin as much as he could. And essentially, I think what his saving grace was, he was able to put his knees together, try to free a hand, push on Ortega's legs, try to get to some sort of guard. And he wasn't even really out of the woods when he got out of the guillotine, because he found himself stuck in a triangle choke, which is what Brian Ortega is known for. This is why they call him T-City, Triangle City. He's got a phenomenal triangle to go with that guillotine. But when you talk about that guillotine, I remember when Ortega fought Cub Swanson, and he got Cub Swanson with that, not a mounted guillotine, but he jumped on a guillotine, got the submission win. And Cub said not only was it a very restricting choke in terms of taking away your air, but he said it was very painful. So you're what a perfect storm of a submission, and that speaks volumes to the toughness of Alexander Volkanovski to get out of that type of submission attempt from Brian Ortega. I mean, that's incredible, and that's a big part of the reason why he's a champion. He's very resilient, he's very tough, and he's very skilled. So I mean, and there was a lot of things going on in that fight. I mean, the exchanges on the feet were good. Volk didn't just use that straightforward pressure. He found some great opportunities to take some angles, sidestep, find some windows to penetrate the defense of Brian Ortega. And Paul, you were, this is the one thing that I really wanted to hear from you about, is you were calling the fights. You were Octagon side, and we had that awkward moment with the referee and Brian Ortega. Is there anything that you heard within the exchange between the fighter and the referee in that fight?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard Volkanovski kind of complain about how he was answering all the questions wrong. And I can tell you, from somebody that was cage side and had microphones giving me audio from what was going on between the referee, the cornerman, and Ortega, there was some either brilliant stalling tactics from Ortega, or we had a group of people that really wanted this fight to continue, because there were some wrong answers. He was not responding immediately to the questions that were asked of him. If he was asked how many fingers, he'd kind of walk side to side. He was speaking to his corner in Spanish. He was doing everything he could to either, find a way out of it or stall and get himself some time. And it worked out, because he ended up getting that chance to go back in there. And just when I thought that Ortega would be done, he's absolutely smashed, because even though he had his 2 submission attempts in that, I think, third round, right?
Yeah.
it ended with him getting absolutely pummeled on the bottom up against the fence with some absolute hammers getting thrown down from Volkanovski. So you saw Ortega didn't even want to get up. I think at that point he was probably done, really didn't want to continue. But then as he stalled and got that time back in the corner, in between rounds, that championship heart came back out of him. And man, when you put him back out there, no matter how bad he didn't want to be in there, Brian Ortega has got heart and he's got durability, because he went out and even all the way through the fourth and the fifth round, he was still looking for his moments. He's that guy that he's always dangerous, that even though he's not winning these rounds, like that fight was much closer than it really appears on the judges' scorecards to me, because even though 49-46, 50-45, 50-44, there was huge moments for the challenger, right? That's what makes Brian Ortega so dangerous, is he's probably not going to win a close unanimous decision over you, but throughout a 3 or even 5 round fight, at any point, you could get finished. So anybody that's ever facing him, you've always got to be completely on your game. And that's why that performance from Volkanovski really sets him apart as one of the great featherweights now, because of how he handled adversity in that fight and just battered through it, kept calm. His fight IQ is fantastic, and just his wherewithal to stay patient and calm in crazy situations. I mean, I'm a much bigger fan of Volkanovski than I already was, and I was a huge fan to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, he does a phenomenal job of staying calm during the chaos. And that's why he's a champion. But, going backwards a little bit and talking about the situation we have with the officiating, and something has to be done. Something has to be done, because what happens if we're having this conversation, Paul, and Brian Ortega goes out and wins in the 4th round? Now we're going to deal with a huge heaping pile of controversy, and it's going to take away from the potential of Brian Ortega if he had won that fight. So I feel like something in terms of the officiating has to be done. I don't know. I try to be. I don't want to criticize the refs, because I will say this: outside of being a fighter, the hardest job in a UFC event is being the ref. It's a hard job. You got to make hard game time decisions. Your people's careers are in your hands. People's livelihoods and their health, they are in your hands. A lot of things are within the ref's control. And that's a situation that the ref had complete control of and kind of let it slip away from him. So I feel like there's something that could have been done better at that particular moment. But I don't want to harp on that too much. I want to talk about Brian Ortega and him. And after that moment, he started to have some of his best rounds in the fight. The 5th round, he came alive. And like you said, Paul, the scorecards don't tell the story of the fight. There was definitely some momentum shifts back and forth. The challenger had a lot of great moments, but Brian Ortega, he's a resilient guy himself. We've seen, in his stock has grown in some of these challenging shortcomings that he's had. In the Max Holloway fight, when that fight got over, we gave him a lot of credit because of his toughness and his durability and his ability to stay in that fight with one of the greatest featherweights of all time. And he just did the same thing with Alexander Volkanovski, who he himself is one of the greatest featherweights of all time. There's so many fun things you can do now that this rivalry has been settled. And when I talk about the champion and what could potentially be next for him, I can't help but go straight to Max Holloway. They've had these 2 close fights, and arguably he won that second one. I mean, arguably a lot of people think he won that fight. And I feel like Max is in a position where he could have just sat and waited and gotten the 3rd fight. But Max Holloway is going to fight Yair Rodriguez later in the year, I believe on November 13th in the main event. I feel like Max is such a fighter's fighter that he wants to he doesn't want to sit and wait for that shot. He wants to go earn it by taking on an ultra tough Yair Rodriguez. So when I talk about what's next for Alexander Volkanovski, I'm leaning towards the winner of Yair and Max Holloway.
No doubt. There's no doubt. There's no question that's what has to happen. I mean, those are the 2 guys that we're going to be watching to see who's going to challenge for the belt next. And big test for Max, but I believe it's a fight that he can absolutely win. But the pace that he puts on people, Yair obviously is insane when he's out there and creative and in the fight until the bitter end, like we saw against Korean Zombie as well. And we need to see him get more active, right? So hopefully if he doesn't win this one, if he goes out there and wins and he gets that shot at the belt, that we see Yair more competitive more often, right? I know he's had some things that have held him back and kept him out of the octagon. And for Brian Ortega too, Michael, I think I think he's got to be careful, right? Because he's definitely one of the top 5 guys out there right now who's going to be challenging for this belt. One of the greatest featherweights in our division at the moment. But he's getting into these fights with the 2 guys who are the best right now, and he's taking tons of damage. And unfortunately for him, I think this is another case where he's going to really have to go and sit on the sidelines for a while, because that was a lot of damage to the body, to the head. It was a grueling fight for him. And that's 2 of them that he's been through challenging for the belt. So I think he's got to go back to the drawing board a bit and start picking out another guy in the top 10, go down the rankings just a bit, because you don't want to be in another 3rd fight in a row where you have to go through something like that. And I'm not saying he's guaranteed a win down in the top 10 or the lower portion of the divisions, but that's what I think he needs to do, is go get somebody that he can really go out there, maybe get a submission win, stay safe, then start working his way back up. I wouldn't want to rush in there with either one of those guys, Max or Volkanovski, until I really get cemented, because he had one brilliant performance against Korean Zombie in between them, but it's been a lot of inactivity since then, before then. So we'll see. But yeah, definitely a year or Max Holloway is who's fighting for the belt. And for Volkanovski, I mean, he's got people like Conor McGregor chiming in on him. So I'm sure he wouldn't have any issues stepping up a weight class to take on that guy as well.
Yeah, I agree. And there's another guy that's chiming in, Mr. Henry Cejudo, talking about being C4.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not even going to bring it up because that guy talks more trash online about getting into fights. He's gassing. Quit gassing, Henry. If you're going to come back, come back. But when I talk about Ortega, you are right. I mean, sandwiched around that brilliant performance he had over Korean Zombie, these 2 grueling fights with Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, who are 2 of the greatest featherweights of all time, undoubtedly. So I do think you got to go down to the bottom of the barrel. And I say that in a positive way. I'm not saying bottom of the barrel like you got to fight a chump. There are no chumps in the UFC. It's all tough fights. But I think that in his situation, it's a double-edged sword. You need to take a step back from these guys that are at the very top of the heap. Let's see if we can string some wins together. But on the other side of it, and we're going to touch on this later on in the show, is you got to give these guys that are ranked lower a shot at the guys at the top of the heap. You got to keep the movement going. A lot of times we see in these weight classes, guys want to sit, hold that number, and sit and wait for the guy that's ranked right above him or right below him, or just try and stay within that realm. I think Ortega needs to take a chance and give a guy a shot against him. Maybe fight a guy that's, I'd like to see him against, maybe a Giga Chikadze. And that's another guy that's ultra dangerous, but you got to give a guy like that a chance to fight the guys at the top of the heap, because he's streaking. We got to see where he's at as well. So nonetheless, I think Brian Ortega's next opponent should be rest. He needs to rest. He needs to let his body chill out, the body, the brain, let everything heal. And it's unfortunate to say that because he's had so much time between a lot of these fights, but this is a situation where he needs to let the body and the brain heal, and that'll give him the best shot at putting together another win streak, and fighting for the title a 3rd time. Sorry.
Yeah, you got to rest that brain, and I say that because I think he's such a talented fighter and so entertaining. And we want to see him. And I want to see this young guy who's only 30 years old. I want to see him competing for many more years. And he can do that, no doubt. Just you got to take your time. And he was smart about it after that Max Holloway fight. And I assume that he's going to be smart about it again. He's not a dumb guy. He's going to go and take some rest and recuperate. But we got to talk about where this ranks amongst greatest title fights of all time. It was exciting, but again, it just happened, right? And we talked about this during the meeting the other night, that when it's fresh in our minds, of course, it's going to be right up there. Oh, it's the greatest of all time. But obviously, there's been some insane title fights throughout the history of the UFC. So where for you does this sit?
I had to fight my recency bias, because for me, I'm such a in the heat of the moment, I'm always like, oh, this is the best fight I've ever seen, or this is, I'm always, whatever the most recent thing I've seen or touched or experienced, that's always the best thing. But I had to step back, let my recency bias take a back seat. And I will say and then when I say this, a lot of people will think I'm nuts. I think it's the top 15. I don't want to say, I mean, when you talk about the greatest title fights of all time, we're talking Robbie Lawler, Rory McDonald. We're talking Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit. We're talking Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, you could go on and on. There's been a lot of phenomenal title fights we've seen in the UFC. So I don't want to jump out there and give it such a high ranking when there's been fights like that have happened before that, you know, time has passed and you kind of forget about these things until you start talking about it. So I will say it's a top 15, you know, maybe a top 10 of all greatest of all time title fights. And when you think about it, that's a pretty dang good number because there's been a lot of really good title fights in the UFC.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty incredible to even think that we're talking about it in the top 15. And we're not really, you know, we haven't had a chance to really sit and look at the data. You know, we haven't crunched the numbers, Michael. We don't know for sure. But I can say it's definitely up there with my top 5 greatest fights of all time that I've ever called for sure. You know, and it's been 4 years that I've had a chance to do this, and I've seen some pretty crazy fights, and I've seen some pretty good title fights throughout the years, and that one was fun. You know, a lot of times by the end of the night, we're pretty damn tired, and that I was not tired by the end of that night. I mean, that fight from round 1 to round 5 was incredible. But the co-main event, we got to touch on that too, because Valentina Shevchenko, who's an absolute dominator, did pretty much what I think most of us, myself, thought was going to happen in this fight. She went out there, she was calculated, she was a sniper, and then she got the assassination at the end. Is this kind of how you thought it was going to play out, Michael?
Well, before we move on to the Valentina fight, I had a question just burning that I had to ask you, Paul. Since you called so many great fights, what's your number 1 UFC title fight? Before we move on to talking about the dominance of Valentina Shevchenko, I just got to ask you, just shooting from the hip here.
God, it's so tough, right? In the moment, there's so many fights. I would say, I mean, that's up there. Man, you're putting me on the spot big time. I think one of the craziest
blame Mike Ricci.
One of the craziest moments I've ever seen, speaking of Yair when he's fighting, is when he landed that freaking up elbow at with a second left in the 5th round in Denver for, I think, one of our anniversary shows. That was probably one of the most insane, crazy moments that I've ever gotten to experience, for sure. That up.
I remember hearing you, Paul. I'll never forget this. When they did the instant replay, I'll never forget Paul Felder. Oh my God. Yeah. It was an up elbow. Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. That's a crazy one. You're a lucky man. Someday I'll get a wingy on one of these cards down the line. But look, back to the subject. Sorry for interrupting you and putting you on the spot, Paulie. You know, Valentina Shevchenko kind of did what we expected her to do. I mean, when Valentina came into the UFC, just a pure striker. I mean, and that is what she leaned on, was just her striking skills. And I just feel like that it's like she's getting so good and she's so dominant that now she's just kind of, I know this is a stretch to say this, but sometimes I feel like she's just out there kind of messing with her opponents, just kind of playing with them. Like, I feel like she could have kept that fight on the feet and gotten the finish, but she's like, you know, maybe I'll take Lauren Murphy down. Maybe I'll land some ground and pound. Maybe I'll mix some things up. I just feel like it's almost like she has to do things outside of her comfort zone or outside of her main skill set to just kind of challenge herself in these fights. Because no disrespect to Lauren Murphy, I don't think Valentina felt like there was no challenge that Lauren had to offer. So I feel like at that point when she just kind of goes out there and just kind of messes with her opponent and toys with them until she's like, all right, I'm going to put you away now. And she did just that. I mean, what a highlight reel finish. Beautiful kick. Followed it up with a very Vitor Belfort-esque running combination, pinned her against the fence, forced the TKO, established her dominance once again. Paul, I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, my question is, what do we do next? Like, where do we put Valentina next? She has just been absolutely cleaning out her division to the point where there's no real cut and dry contender. So my question is, how do we find out who's next for her? Because you can't look down just the top 3 that are in front of her because she's already beaten everybody. So you were talking about something interesting. So I'm going to let you elaborate on what you think we need to do in that flyweight division, and kind of along the lines of you were talking about, we need to maybe look down the rankings and try to immediately build one of these contenders who looks like they've got potential, give them a couple fights, and then hopefully they'll be ready for somebody like Valentina.
Well, here's the thing. I think when it comes to what's next for Valentina Shevchenko, I think the best thing for us to do, instead of giving somebody another rematch, that something that we kind of already seen. I don't really want to see another rematch or another fight with Jessica Andrade. You know, Jessica had a great performance on the same night that the champion fought, but I don't think anybody really wants to see that again. I think the best thing we could do for Valentina, the best thing we could do for the fans, and the best thing we could do for the UFC is we got a lot of tough up-and-coming prospects at 125 pounds. I say we take one of these fighters, whether they're in the bottom of the top 15, maybe if they're not even ranked, but put one of these lower ranked fighters in a match against somebody at the top of the heap. And if they can break through and win that fight, put them in that title fight. Let's give somebody the push. Let's give somebody the opportunity. Look, and I already have a name picked out for me. I'm talking about Manon Fiorot. I think that she's got phenomenal striking skills. I think that it's enough to make she's got enough skills on the feet that she can make the fight interesting with Valentina Shevchenko. In terms of how well-rounded she is, we don't know. That's why we got to take a fighter like Manon Fiorot, and we got to give her the push to the top of the heap instead of making her fight 2, 3, 4, 5 fights before she gets a title fight. I say she wins her next fight. We put her at the top of the heap, see how she performs against the upper echelon of the division. And if she can pull through, put her in a title fight. Let's give somebody an opportunity. I think that would be the best thing to do for Valentina, the best thing to do for the flyweight division, best thing for the fans in the UFC alike.
Yeah, and she's got a fight coming up October 16th. Her fight actually got postponed, but she will be fighting. And if she wins that one, I agree. Why not then give her just immediately a top contender? Because what's the point of waiting around? You got to push these girls because Valentina is still a dominant champion. You got to get her contenders, and that girl does stand up. Her striking is fantastic. I got to call her UFC debut, and she is smooth. But another crazy fight that we had, and mixed emotions, I'll say, with this one is Diaz Lawler, because it was amazing to see Lawler go out there and get that fire again and look fantastic. And we were all so pumped to see Nick make his return. And he had moments where he looked fantastic. But obviously, with the weight switch, there's obviously some things going on personally with him that he's battling. And to see him kind of just get hit with that shot and not want to continue is very uncharacteristic of him. So you got to makes you wonder, with all those interviews he did with Brett and the build up to the fight and talking about not liking the matchup, not wanting to be there, not liking fighting, but it's his job. Do you want to see him fight again? I want to see him fight again. I'll start with myself. I want to see him fight again, but if it's like that again, if we see that fire not there, if he's not making weight or he's switching around weight classes, then I think he needs to just focus on himself and becoming a happier person and figuring out what things are bothering him in his life and coach and do his thing and worry about Nate. Because I don't want to see that again. I don't want to see him get hit with a shot and just decide he doesn't want to continue anymore. Because he's too damn good, to be honest with you. When he was letting his hands go, the boxing was crisp. The man still has hands, even though it looked like he maybe didn't have the best training camp building up to that. And just huge congrats to Robbie, who was nothing but class throughout his entire career. Got that one back. They're 1-1 now. So yeah, it was great to see. But Michael, what do you think? What were the emotions going through for you on that one? It was a bit of a strange ending.
Well, before I elaborate on Nick Diaz, I gotta say, first and foremost, Robbie Lawler looked phenomenal. Looked like the Robbie of old. And this is a guy, Robbie Lawler is 39 years old, and he went out there and fought one of his best performances of recent memory. And look, it's crazy that we're having this conversation, Paul, because just last week we're talking about how, like, this is a new version of Nick Diaz we're seeing. We're watching the UFC Countdown show, and this is a different shade to him. He seems happier. He seems like he's in a better place. And you even go back further than that, and you look at his social media, and he was doing triathlons. He was doing races. He was swimming. He was running. He looked really fit. And all of a sudden, we're getting into fight week, and he wants to change weight classes, And so for me, I'm thinking, that there's got to be an injury. There's got to be something going on, and who knows what it is. Nick. A tumultuous life nonetheless, from the time he was born to now. He's had a pretty crazy life. So who knows what's going on. All I know is I wish him nothing but the best. But look, I'm a huge Nick Diaz fan, and Nick is a personal friend of mine. And I would love to see him fight again, Paul. But the problem is you even though you are Nick Diaz, the UFC still, you're not always going to get a fight with a Robbie Lawler or a guy that's maybe in the same age bracket as you or same kind of legend status, I should say. There's not a lot of options out there for him. And I don't want to see Nick Diaz fight again if he's going to have to go fight. Like, let's say, they're like, oh, we want to build a guy. Fight Khamzat Chimaev or fight a Sean Brady or fight a guy that's a tough up-and-coming guy. Yeah. The best fight, I want to see Nick Diaz fight again only if I get to see him in a like a legend versus legend type of fight. I don't want to see him out there fighting some young up-and-coming prospect if he's still kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out on the sport. Because Paul, as well as I do, if you're on the fence with competition, If you're on the fence about fighting in general, that's how you get hurt. That is
Yeah.
how you get hurt. And when you see how things transpired in the fight with Robbie and how he got hit with the shot and he just took a knee and was like, I'm not getting up. It's not always going to be like that. If you fight again and you're not really committed to it and committed to the process and just ready to take on all risks that come with getting into that octagon, you might not be able to take a knee and choose your way out. Somebody might force your way out. So I don't want to see Nick Diaz fight again unless it's going to be a legend versus legend type of fight.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And if he's going to enjoy it a little bit more, that's what's more important. But speaking of enjoying fights, those 3 fights were not the only fights on this card that were absolutely incredible. I want to start with one of them that stood out to me, and it's a former opponent of mine, Dan Hooker. Looked unreal against Hack's Press, who both these guys, visa issues, coming in on Thursday night, making weight on Friday, and then putting on the show that they put on. And for Nasrat, also losing his mother, who was extremely close to him, going through a whole lot. And then Dan showing a ton of class in the post-fight. They actually had a funny little exchange afterwards where Hack Press was like, I thought we were going to stand up. And he's like, well, I was sick of you just staring at me the whole time. I was sick of trying to chase you. I was trying to engage. But Dan's wrestling really stood out to me. He had some really nice double legs, cutting the angle really well to finish that takedown. And just showed an overall well-roundedness to his game again, which we've seen snippets of, but normally we see him go out there and show that city kickboxing style. But that fight was fun, back and forth. Nasrat was landing some big shots, but just couldn't put the volume together, and then ultimately was out-grappled.
Hey, dude, and your pick delivered. Your pick delivered. The fight you chose last week delivered, and my pick delivered as well. Merab Dvalishvili versus Marlon Moraes. Oh my! Just a chaotic first round. I mean, we're talking this fight really went exactly how I thought it would, but that doesn't mean that it didn't. It's not like I thought Merab was going to 100% win this fight, because guess what? What did Marlon Moraes do? He put it on him in round 1, dropped him twice, was this close to getting the finish. Then Merab, just gritty, tough, still trying to trade with him while he's rocked, gets him to the floor, and then almost finishes him. That had to have been one of the best rounds of the year, 100%. I mean, Paul, what was it? I mean, you were going nuts. You're like, I want to throw my headset off. I can't handle this round.
I wanted to break something. I wanted to break something. When you get so damn excited, me and DC are like, I have to break something to show how excited I am for this fight. It was so crazy, man. And Merab, just every time we see him, the man grows on people. If you thought he was, always a boring wrestler, he's going to take you down. No, the dude is an animal, man. He's one of those guys that makes that fighting style exciting. He's not going to just take you down. He's going to try to hammer fist Donkey Kong your head off the whole time that he's on top of you. Another fight that stood out, and another performance, I should say, really, is my man from Philly, Chris Daukaus. This guy, 4-0, 4 finishes, whether it be knockout or TKO in the UFC at heavyweight. That's a big statement. And now there's rumors that they're trying to match him up with Derek Lewis next. I mean, that's a mega fight. I just messaged him the other day saying congrats. And, I know it's still being worked out. It's not official yet, but that's a mega offer, especially for a guy who's a Philadelphia police officer who is now going to go for a little leave of absence and focus on his MMA career. I mean, we're talking about this guy is just now going to finally officially focus on his MMA career, and he's 4-0 in the UFC. So good on you, Chris.
Paul, I got to give us a little credit. We hit the nail on the head with these 3 fights, from the Hooker fight to the Merab fight to the Daukaus fight. I mean, we really hit the nail on the head with these matchups. And it even goes as far as when you say that he's in the works to fight Derek Lewis. You called it last week. You said if this guy can go out there and get another finish, there's no way he's not getting a guy at the top of the heap at heavyweight. And it just goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about throughout this show is movement. You want to see the type of movement. You want to see guys get their shot. You got to give these guys their opportunities when they're winning. Don't make them have to pluck fight by fight to work their way up. If somebody's streaking and someone's hot, throw them to the top of the heap. Let's see if they can swim. Let's see if they can keep their head above water against the best fighters in their division. And look, Daukaus versus Lewis, I am in 100% on that fight. I think that's perfect matchmaking. I hope we see it happen. Paul, you're a genius. This is why you're Paul Felder. This is why you're one of the best commentators in the UFC. This is why you're the host of UFC Roundup. This man knows his stuff.
I'm crunching the numbers. That's why I look so tired right now. I'm disheveled because I can't put the data down, Speaking of data and fights coming up, obviously this Saturday we've got Brazil versus Brazil and main event, Santos and Walker. What are your thoughts on that one?
Man, what a fun fight that is. I mean, you don't really see a lot of Brazil versus Brazil matchups. I feel like, it's just something that's not commonplace, especially in a main event. But nonetheless, you got two guys that are just dynamic finishers. I mean, Johnny Walker, just a wild man. You just don't know what he's going to do. Just a wide variety of attacks. And Thiago Santos, you just know this is like the live by the sword, die by the sword type of guy. He's fought across 3 weight classes in the UFC. It's crazy to think, Paul, that at one point in time, Thiago Santos fought at welterweight. And when you see the guy, it's just, I can't even wrap my head around it. I cannot believe this man made 170 pounds before. But look, this is a guy in Thiago Santos who arguably a lot of people thought that he beat John Jones. I actually fought that same night as Thiago, and a lot of people thought he dethroned the greatest of all time, John Jones. And he had bad knees. He had no knees that fight. He was basically on ice skates, having the ligaments in his knees just completely shot. So this is a guy who's ultra tough. In both of these guys, I mean, whoever can come out on top in this fight is going to position themselves nicely in this weight class. But I got to say, I don't think 5 rounds is necessary. I would be surprised if this fight gets out of round 2. I mean, these guys are both, very, very dangerous finishers, especially Johnny Walker. I don't think the 25 minutes is necessary. I think this fight ends by finish, and I think it's got the potential to be fireworks.
Yeah, I would agree with that one, Michael. I don't think it's going to go to the judge's decision. These guys are just both too explosive, too dangerous. And I would say neither one really known for having absolutely fantastic cardio, right? I think it's pretty clear both of these guys are going to go out there and try to take each other's heads off and get it out of there. But I got to ask you, do you have a prediction?
Man, I'm going with my boy Thiago. I got a little bias. I like Thiago a lot. I spent a lot of time training with him a couple years ago because we're both in Vegas at the same time. And even when I take my bias out of it, I just think that Thiago has the ability to really, I guess the best way to say, storm the castle. He's got a good straight line attack. He's got a really good blitz, and I think that he can really blitz through the reach of Johnny Walker. If he can avoid the unorthodox attacks of Johnny Walker and really just blitz through his reach and get inside, I think that he has the ability to finish this fight. But that's no easy task.
Yeah, I would go Santos. I think the first round these guys are going to beat the crap out of each other, and I think Santos might even get hurt. He has a tendency to get hit, but I think second or third round, I'm going to say TKO finish for Santos. It would be my guess on the matter. But again, to anybody that was taking our advice and would gamble on it, I wouldn't be surprised with a Johnny Walker KO early in the fight as well, because it's completely possible with these two. It's one of those fights. It's going to be a little bit tough to really nail down because both just have absolute finishing power wherever they throw, whether it be kicks, knees, elbows, punches. Both guys know how to take each other's heads off. But we're going to rattle through some of these other fights on the card that stand out. And I think one of the good places to start, since we've had some siblings from 266 are fighting on this card, and we have Kyle Daukaus, Chris Daukaus's brother, is fighting Kevin Holland. An incredible matchup for him. Holland's trying to really prove himself again. He's been working a lot on that wrestling, trying to make his game more well-rounded. And Kyle has always shown that he's well-rounded, but kind of just hasn't been able to string it all together, get some big finishes. But I think this is a fun matchup for those guys, and I think Kyle's going to really be coming into this one pretty damn inspired after seeing what his brother has been capable of doing. He's going to want to join him and get on a streak like this and try to take over. So that's my fight to really look out for. That's one of them.
Yeah, and that's a great match. And the one thing Kevin Holland's been doing, actually I think that this is 100% confirmed. I know he's been working with Johnny Hendricks on his wrestling. And for people that don't know, Johnny Hendricks, one of the greatest wrestlers to ever come out of Oklahoma State, former welterweight champion, he's going to be in his corner as well. So Holland addressing the holes in his game. And then you got Daukaus, who's just going to be riding the wave of his big brothers. Huge KO win from 266. I think that's going to be a really interesting co-main event. The fight I'm looking forward to most is Cowboy Oliveira versus Nico Price. Look, both of these guys, it's very eerie similarities to the main event. Both guys are this fight has the same, it's got the same potential as Walker versus Santos. You don't know with these guys what's going to happen. Nico Price can knock you out from his back. Alex Oliveira is a wild man himself. And between these two guys, they have 15 children. And I just feel like I have to note that because I just think that something about that is just fascinating to me. Alex Oliveira I Googled this is confirmed. He has 10 children. and Nico Price has 5. So between these two guys, they have a small army. So it's like let the fathers go fight it out. I think that's going to be a super fun fight, and it's going to be fireworks. But I just think it's funny. I had to bring up the fact that these guys they got some strong swimmers.
They're good at 2 things. They're good at 2 things: fighting and making babies.
That's right.
Babies. And on the prelims, I got a shout out, of course, my number 1 man, Jared Gordon, taking on Joe Salecki, moving up to 155. You know, Jared had a lot of struggles making featherweight, so bumping up a weight class, and he gets to take on Joe Salecki, who's this young contender who's shown a lot of well-rounded skill sets. His stand-up's always improving. The kid is a stud on the ground. I'm really excited to see this one and how it plays out, to see if Jared's going to choose to box him up, try to use his striking to keep it at distance. But we know Jared, where he does his best work, taking you down, pummeling you with ground and pound, and just controlling you on the mat. And if a submission opens up, the man is a brown belt. He's capable of taking it. But really, the pressure and control that Jared brings to the ground game is what's essential. And he's dominant in those positions. I've trained with him for years and years and years, and he's so difficult to deal with.
Jared's got brilliant ground and pound skills. I mean, I've picked his brain a little bit, and there's a lot of layers to his techniques. He really does have great top control. He's a dangerous guy to have on top of you when it comes to getting in a fist fight. I'm really looking forward to that one too. I'm a big Jared Gordon fan, and another fight on the prelims I'm looking forward to. Another sibling. You got Valentina Shevchenko, the sister of the great champion, taking on Casey O'Neill. Great. This is a huge opportunity for Casey O'Neill to go take on, the sister of the champion. And you could create a storyline with that. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about fighters getting a chance to break through. Casey O'Neill, you go out there and get a big win over the champ's sister, get on that mic, call your shot. You could really find a way to propel yourself to the top of the rankings and really get into that fight. And Casey O'Neill, I mean, she's in the same category as Manon Farrow is a real contender, potential contender, making their way up in the flyweight division. So a lot of good fights on this card, and it's going to be my first show back on the desk since July. So I'm excited to get out there and use my analytical brain. I love working the desk. I love getting to be involved with the narratives of these fights, and it's going to be a good time.
All right, hey, we're nearing the end of this great show, and we got some fan questions. We asked you guys to give them to us, and we got them. Let me get them up here real quick. They're pretty hilarious. We got some funny ones this week, Michael.
Yeah, we do. They're pretty good.
The first one is, how many Brandon Morenos does it take to stop a Francis Ngannou? From AXXX.
Hey, I'm going to say this. It only takes one Brandon Moreno. It's going to just the one flyweight champion alone. I'm saying just one Brandon Moreno. I think he's slick. He's fast. He can, if he's got to dive under his legs, if he can just kind of crawl around him, maybe try to wear him out. He's got phenomenal cardio. I'm not saying Francis doesn't. I'm just saying Francis carries a lot of muscle. Moreno's slick. I'm saying the Moreno alone pose some serious threats to the baddest man on the planet.
Yeah, maybe if he had a gun. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna be realistic. If I'm thinking they're in a cage, you got Brandon Morenos and you got an Ngannou. I'm gonna say it would take probably 15 Brandon Morenos to take him down. Because I mean,
one for each finger, one for each toe.
Yeah, if he just starts kicking his legs at Morenos, he's going to be knocking them all over the octagon. It's going to look like a Lord of the Rings situation where orcs are just going flying all over the place when those crazy giant ones come marching through. Anyway, we can't spend all day on just that one, but that's a good question.
Yeah.
This one is, would you rather get punched in the face by Francis Ngannou, or lose a fight to Jake Paul?
Just ice me. If Francis is gonna hit me on the chin and knock me out, for one, I'm not gonna feel it. Well, maybe when I wake up with a busted jaw or a fractured orbital or just whatever physical damage it would endure, I would rather take that one punch than lose to Jake Paul. Especially because there's a lot of things we're not addressing, like, okay, is there money involved? That's not a part of the equation, but just taking it for face value, I'd rather get punched by Francis Ngannou than lose a fight to Jake Paul.
Yeah. And we're not being specific, right? This person messed up, because if they had said you had to get punched in the face by Francis Ngannou, then maybe I'll just take my L to Jake Paul. But if I can take it on the arm, all right, I'll take a broken arm, I'll heal up, and I'll move on. And I don't have that. I'd rather take an L from getting a broken arm to Ngannou, the baddest heavyweight on the planet, than have to just go through the circus of the other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Just that alone. Like, I just don't want the headache of all of that. I'm not throwing shade at anybody. Just no thanks.
Hey, if you think the Conor McGregor army's bad, I mean,
Yeah.
the Jake Paul trolls.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it'd be terrible.
This one's from Randy. Volkanovski's shaved head helped him get out of that guillotine. Why do fighters not take advantage of that fact? Well, yeah, I think he's right. I think there's definitely some advantages to having like a completely clean, bald head and sweating, and, you know, maybe some Vaseline from the face gets on there. But it's just, I mean, I think the advantages you get from it don't outweigh how you look. You know what I mean? If you're a guy that can pull it off, I think Volk will look fine with a shaved head, right? He's a guy who keeps his hair super tight anyway, mostly with maybe like a little bit up top and a little mohawk action. But I mean, if you got luxurious hair like me and Chiesa, it's tough to convince us to shave that head. Are you going to shave it? I mean, you're fighting Brady. He's got a guillotine. Both you guys should have a shaved head for this fight. I'm saying it now, both of you, even the playing field. Sean Brady, Michael Chiesa, shaved head challenge.
I have a picture of me with a shaved head, like a Snapchat filter, and it's not. I'm not shaving my head. I'll tell you. Look, I'd rather just train a lot of guillotine. I'll train a lot of guillotine defense for Sean before I shave my head. Because look, my fiance might change her mind and be like, "Yo, you know about this marriage thing next year? I'm not really into it anymore."
This one, speaking of hair, would you rather see Dana or Joe Rogan with a full head of hair? Well, I can remember seeing Joe more recently from flashbacks of things like, you know, when he was calling the original UFCs and what was the TV show? Fear Factor, and even the other one from way back when News Radio, right? So, I mean, I can imagine Joe Rogan with hair, but I would love if out of nowhere we got to see Dana, full head of hair, just show up, slick to the side with his jeans and his T-shirt look going on. Come on, boss.
Imagine if
get them plants in there. Let's see.
You know how we have Blonde Brunson? Imagine Blonde Dana.
Somebody's going to Photoshop that for us,
bro. Yeah. Well, on that same note, I found this picture. Let's see if you can see it. But this is why I don't want to shave my head, Paul.
Oh, bro.
Like I said, I'd rather train my guillotine defense than
like that. You don't even look like the same human being.
Yeah, no. Guillotine defense before I shave all day.
Yeah, all right. I'm with you. I support you now. Last one. From Ron Diaz 713. Would you rather chug? This one is good. Would you rather chug 2 beers before a fight or eat 2 Big Macs? Michael, me and you don't even have to have talked about this one ahead of time. I think we're both chugging them freaking beers before a fight.
Oh yeah, dude. A little bit of liquid courage. I'd rather go in there I'd rather go in there carb loaded, buzzed up, and feeling good than have a Big Mac gut bomb × 2. It just doesn't sound very appealing to me.
Yeah, who's saying I haven't chugged 2 beers before a fight? Anyway, listen, guys, that's our show. I'm Paul Felder. He's Michael Chiesa. Tune in this Saturday. Walker and Santos will be going at it. That's a crazy, crazy main event right there. 2 Brazilian studs. And hey, we're trying to figure things out, but we will be coming to you again. We're going to keep these rolling. So again, keep the fan questions coming. Keep them lighthearted. Keep them serious. It doesn't matter. #UFC Roundup. And we'll see you guys next week.